So I am a solid waste professional. I work for Orlando Solid Waste Department. With that being said, on the periphery of my tasking and duties, I am part of the Orlando Greenworks team, which is just anyone who has anything to do with sustainability at all. So we have people involved in solid waste, wastewater, clean energy, green buildings, livability, all kinds of sustainability areas. All right, so why is recycling important? We kind of all know that recycling or at least waste is in one way or another bad for the environment, but there are many ways in which recycling is important, right? Landfills are a significant source of greenhouse gases. In 2014, US landfills released 163 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And I know that that number is so superfluous and beyond reasoning, even for people like me who are in the industry. So I'm going to do my best to accommodate that figure in a way that's more easily understandable. So here in the United States, our landfills release enough greenhouse gases where if those greenhouse gases were to be captured and utilized as energy, they would be able to power every single single family home in Florida for 2 years. So all greenhouse gas from our country would be able to power every single family home in Florida for 2 years. So it's a significant source of greenhouse gases, and it's something we definitely can't ignore. Furthermore, plastics do not decompose naturally. We like to put a lifespan on plastics and other materials when they go to the landfill, but the reality is that plastic does not decompose. It does break down, but only under very specific laboratory settings does plastic actually decompose. So what happens is it'll sit in the landfill and it will break down into smaller and smaller pieces. We've all heard of, or most likely we've all heard of the term microplastics. These are just the result of what we're talking about, right? Plastics sit in the landfill, or they make their way into our large bodies of water, and they break down into microplastics. And these end up inevitably, we end up ingesting them, or other animals ingesting them. And they make their way into our sources of water, and we don't want that, right? We want to avoid that as much as possible. And lastly, recycled materials are a commodity, which is just a fancy way of saying that recycled materials have value, right? A monetary value. They have an actual dollar value associated with them. So in any way that we can recycle a particular item, it's going to save us money. It's gonna save the environment, protect the environment in the long term. You guys have talked about the 3 R's, even the 4 R's. So reuse, always preferable over recycling. So many items such as clothing and books can be donated. Backyard composting is an excellent way to reuse leftover food. If you live in the city of Orlando, I'm not sure where everyone's joining us from, but if you live in the city of Orlando, we do have a commercial food waste program. We also have food waste drop-off locations, and we can offer a free composter to any single family home that's within city limits. So we have many different sustainability strategies that all work towards our zero waste to the landfill goal and help us divert waste from our landfills. Reduce, this is another good one. Prioritize items with less packaging, print two-sided, use electronic mail, avoid disposable items. All city facilities in Orlando have banned single-use plastics. So if you ever go to a city facility or even one of our venues, the Amalie Arena, for example, where you can see the Magic player or maybe a concert, you'll never find single-use plastics there. We don't allow them at our facilities anymore. All right, so this is kind of my bread and butter. This is what I love talking about. Believe it or not, the idea of what can or cannot be recycled does not change much from one city to another, one state to one country to another. It's very robust and a healthy system, recycling. Right? A lot of times people think that it's broken or fragile, and in some ways it is, but overall it's a pretty well-established system. In fact, it's so well established that a lot of people don't like talking about it anymore because it's just ingrained in our daily operation. But with that being said, it is still incredibly important. So real quick, the items that are typically recyclable are your metals, your aluminums, aluminum cans, aluminum, steel, and tin cans, paper products, so that's food and beverage cartons, newspaper, magazines, and mail, glass, to include bottles and jars, cardboard, one of the most important staples in recycling, cereal boxes and flattened cardboard. Flattened is the key word here. Cardboard is a very valuable material, but when you're disposing of it, make sure it's flattened, right? We live in the era of Amazon where, on a daily basis, maybe some of us get Amazon boxes. Fortunately, those are easily recyclable. Unfortunately, a lot of times people don't break those down. They just dispose of them into their recycling container, which is good, but we want those to be broken down as small as possible in order to make it easier for the actual sorting process once it reaches what we call a MRF, a material recovery facility. And then plastics, kitchen, laundry, bath, bottles, and containers. What I like to say is just bottles, tubs, and jugs. Some of the thicker plastic, those are always the plastics that we prioritize. Plastics number 1 and 2, the HDPEs, high density plastics. And then at the bottom here, we can see items that we don't want to recycle. So one of the biggest contaminants in the recycling stream are plastic bags, right? Bagged recycling and then plastic bags by themselves. Whenever you recycle, it's best to deposit your recyclable items loosely in whatever container you have for collection, whether it's a dumpster, a curbside cart, or even a curbside bin, right? We want to dispose of those items in there loosely whenever possible. Styrofoam, technically a plastic, technically recyclable. And this is a big distinction that needs to be made in items that are recyclable and items that are recyclable in your curbside collection, right? We can recycle styrofoam and plastic wrapping and bags, but just not in our curbside recycling. That's because the facility that processes those materials is unable to process those materials in a way that doesn't actually break down that equipment. So for example, and as we're about to see in the video I have queued up, plastic bags can be very detrimental to the recycling sorting process. And lastly, household garbage, things like diapers, food waste. We don't ever want to see those in recyclable. Technically, they're recyclable, but just in a different way, right? Food can be recycled by or reused, repurposed by placing it in a composter or disposing of it through a food waste program. So just a couple of frequently asked questions that come up that I like to address. This is one of the best parts of my job, is reassuring people that recycling is a robust and successful program. One of the biggest questions is recycling broken? And the truth is that recycling has had a very turbulent or rocky past, especially in the mid to late 2010s, 15 through 18, when most of our recycling used to go to China. And overnight, China decided to stop accepting any recyclable material that was greater than 1% contaminated, which is almost all recycling. But thankfully, over the past couple of years, recycling has recovered. It's actually doing better than it ever has. A lot of those recycled materials are worth more than they have been in the past, which is great for everyone, those of us in the industry, as well as those of us that are consider ourselves environmental stewards. Another question is, I saw the same garbage truck pick up my recycling, the same garbage truck that picked up my garbage. Does that mean it's just going to the landfill? Well, if you live in a location that utilizes single stream recycling, which means that all recyclable materials go into the same container, right? You may live in a neighborhood where you separate your paper and cardboard from everything else, or maybe your glass from everything else. If you live in an area where you can put it all into the same container, we use the same trucks to pick up garbage and recycling. We're just running different routes. So you may see a garbage truck come by and pick up your garbage, and then later in the day, or maybe another day, it comes and picks up your recycling. Rest assured that your recycling is being recycled. The next question is, why aren't plastic bags recyclable? The answer, the long answer is that they are recyclable, but not in your curbside recycling. So you can take these items frequently to a grocery store, but frequently your grocery stores or other shopping centers will have kiosks set up in the lobby or entrance area where you can bring things like your plastic bags or styrofoam and recycle those there. They will do it for you. What should I do if I'm not sure whether or not an item is recyclable? Do your research if you can. If you absolutely cannot find out whether an item is recyclable or not, we have a motto, which is when in doubt, throw it out. Obviously, we want to see as much recycled material go into recycling as possible. But if you are unsure, it's best to dispose of it in the garbage so that it doesn't become a contaminant in that load of recyclable material. What happens to my recycling after it's picked up? The good news is that I have an awesome video that showcases what recycling looks like once we dispose of it, right? It's almost like we put garbage and we put recycling inside of a can or a dumpster, and then it's almost as if a ferry comes overnight and takes it away. But the reality is that there's an actual process, a very elaborate and involved process that happens after recyclable materials leave our hands. And if we can go ahead and play that video, I'm excited to see how everyone responds to it.
The original materials recovery processing facility opened in 1990. Due to maintenance and operating costs, this facility currently serves as a transfer station for recyclables. Once recyclables are dropped off, they are inspected for contamination and then transported for processing to the Waste Management Materials Recovery Facility located in Cocoa Beach. Recyclables are dropped off at the Materials Recovery Facility to be sorted and prepared for remanufacturing. First, they are dumped on the facility's floor, then loaded into a conveyor belt to begin the sorting process. Workers remove any visible non-recyclables. Afterwards, all of the recyclables fall into a machine with star-shaped wheels that float the cardboard and paper, while heavier materials fall to a lower floor. Additional workers separate paper by hand before the rest of the recyclables are moved onto an area that uses vibrations and air to further process the materials. From here, glass is crushed and separated into a storage area. Plastic and metal materials move on to the next stage. Metal cans are separated from the remaining materials using a strong magnet, and plastics are identified using optical sorters. Optical sorters are lasers that can identify the type of plastic resin that makes up the material. Once the type of plastic is identified, a puff of air will separate it and send it into a separate area of the facility. Finally, aluminum cans are magnetized by an eddy current, a type of electrical current, and sent into another area of the facility. After all the materials have been separated by type, they are crushed into bales and sent to recycling plants for remanufacturing into new materials.
All right, excellent. I hope that was informative. I do get a lot of questions, especially from kids and youth, about what that process looks like, and it's kind of hard to describe. Honestly, it's best to watch a video. There's millions and millions of dollars worth of heavily sophisticated equipment that these MRFs, these material recovery facilities, utilize in order to sort that material. What if I want to recycle, but my apartment or condo doesn't offer it? Well, the good news is that in Orlando, as of April 1st of next year, all apartments and condominiums, all multifamily properties and commercial properties will be required to offer recycling. And this is something that's catching on throughout the country. Orlando is certainly not the first to implement something like this. We won't be the last. So the more municipalities that come on board with stuff like this, the more it's going to spread, the more it's going to catch on, and the better all of our futures will be for it. Are there other options for recycling? I often get questions about textiles or electronics. There are, however, the best option is to again do your research. Look for what's near you. Orlando is fortunate to have a What Goes Where app, or we call it Orlando Collects or Recollect. You can enter any item on this app and it will tell you how to dispose of it. If you can't dispose of it in your collection, in either your garbage or recycling curbside collection, it will give you options for where to take it. It might be take it to a hazardous household waste facility. Or it might list any other option for example, scrap metal or electronics or textiles.